My name is Marlene. I'm 28 years old, and I never imagined my sister's jealousy would lead to this moment of standing in handcuffs outside Cartier jewelry store while Teresa was being arrested for assault. The VIP treatment I received inside had been confusing enough, but when she called me a shadow before slapping me across the face in front of dozens of witnesses, I thought my world was crumbling. But the real shock came when a stranger walked in claiming I was his wife, revealing a truth that would change everything I believed about my own identity. Before we dive into this incredible story that involves memory loss, family betrayal, and a billionaire's protection, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you're ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, and don't forget to subscribe, because this tale of sisterly jealousy and hidden identity is just getting started. Let me explain how a simple jewelry store visit changed everything I thought I knew about my life. To understand how everything spiraled so dramatically, you need to know about the complicated relationship between my sister Teresa and me that had been building tension for over 2 decades. We grew up in a working-class family in Phoenix where our father worked construction, and our mother was a school secretary, and money was always tight in our household. Despite our parents' best efforts to treat us equally, I seemed to excel in areas where Teresa struggled, creating an unspoken rivalry that would eventually destroy our family bond. From an early age, I had shown talent in art and academics, spending hours drawing and painting, while Teresa preferred watching television or hanging out with friends. When I was 16, I won the state art competition with a landscape painting of the desert sunset, earning a feature in the local newspaper and praise from teachers and family friends. Teresa, who was 14 at the time, struggled with undiagnosed learning disabilities that made school a constant source of frustration and embarrassment for her. Our parents, without realizing the impact of their actions unconsciously, began favoring my achievements in ways that deeply wounded Teresa's self-esteem. They displayed my artwork prominently throughout our house, bragged about my grades to neighbors and relatives, and constantly held me up as an example of what hard work could accomplish. Meanwhile, Teresa's efforts in sports and social activities went largely unnoticed, creating a painful dynamic where she felt invisible in her own family. The damage became evident during our high school years, when I received a full scholarship to study graphic design at Arizona State University, while Teresa barely managed to graduate with a 2.1 grade point average. Family celebrations of my acceptance letters and scholarship awards were torture for Teresa, who had already started calling me the golden child, with increasing bitterness and resentment. During my college years studying graphic design and building an impressive portfolio, Teresa bounced between retail jobs at the mall, never able to hold a position for more than 6 months before getting fired for tardiness or attitude problems. She developed a drinking problem and started making cutting remarks about my supposed luck at every family gathering, turning holiday dinners into tense affairs where everyone walked on eggshells. The pattern continued into our adult years as I built a modest but successful freelance graphic design business, while Teresa's life became increasingly chaotic and unstable. She had been fired from her 3rd job this year, for arguing with customers, received an eviction notice for unpaid rent, and seemed to blame me for her misfortunes despite my repeated offers to help her find work or provide financial assistance. My current life was comfortable, but certainly not luxurious. I lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, drove a reliable used Honda Civic, and had been dating Kevin, an accountant, for about 8 months. We enjoyed simple pleasures like hiking in the desert, cooking dinner together, and saving money for a potential vacation to California next year. The shadow nickname that Teresa had started using recently was particularly painful because it captured her belief that she had spent her entire life living in my shadow, never able to achieve recognition or success of her own. Every conversation with her became an opportunity for her to list my advantages and her disadvantages, as if life was a zero-sum game where my success automatically meant her failure. Recent events had made Teresa's desperation more apparent than ever. She had been evicted from her apartment and was crashing on friends' couches, having burned bridges with our parents after stealing money from their retirement fund to pay gambling debts. Her financial situation had become so dire that she had started making increasingly desperate comments about needing a big break or finding some way to change her circumstances quickly. Looking back now, I realized that Teresa's mounting desperation and resentment had been building towards some kind of explosion, but I never imagined it would manifest in such a public and devastating way. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal truths none of us were prepared to handle. The chain of events that led to that fateful day at Cartier began 3 weeks earlier when I received an elegant cream-colored invitation in my mailbox that immediately caught my attention. The envelope was made of expensive paper stock with my name written in elegant calligraphy, and inside was an invitation to an exclusive private viewing at the Cartier boutique in Scottsdale Fashion Square. The invitation was unlike anything I had ever received, with gold-embossed lettering that read VIP Client Appreciation Event and mentioned a personal stylist consultation with champagne service. There was no explanation of how I had qualified for such an exclusive invitation, and I assumed it must be some kind of random marketing campaign targeting people in certain zip codes or demographics. Kevin found the invitation amusing when I showed it to him that evening. "Why not go and live like rich people for a day?" he joked while helping me research Cartier's collections online. "Maybe you'll get some inspiration for your design work, and worst case scenario, you drink some expensive champagne and look at pretty jewelry." The research phase was both exciting and intimidating as I browsed through Cartier's website, discovering that even their simplest pieces cost more than I made in several months. Necklaces started at $20,000, watches began around $15,000, and their famous engagement rings could easily cost six figures. I realized quickly that I wouldn't be able to afford anything, but the invitation specifically mentioned that attendance was complimentary. I decided to treat the event as a cultural experience, similar to visiting a museum or art gallery, where I could appreciate beautiful craftsmanship without any pressure to purchase. As a graphic designer, I was always interested in studying luxury branding and high-end marketing techniques, so this seemed like a perfect opportunity to observe how elite retailers operated. The morning of my appointment, I realized I had nothing appropriate to wear to such an upscale establishment. After going through my entire wardrobe twice, I settled on borrowing Kevin's nicest dress shirt and pairing it with my only pair of dress pants and low heels. Even with my best efforts, I felt underdressed and worried that the Cartier staff would take one look at me and realize I didn't belong in their world. When I arrived at the Scottsdale Fashion Square and found the Cartier boutique, I was immediately struck by the pristine storefront with its iconic red signage and windows displaying jewelry that sparkled like captured starlight. The interior was even more impressive, with white marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and display cases that looked like works of art themselves. What happened next completely bewildered me. Instead of the polite but distant greeting, I expected the store manager approached me immediately with an enthusiasm that seemed almost excessive for someone she had never met before. She was an impeccably dressed woman in her 40s with perfectly styled hair and a warm but professional demeanor. "Mrs. Williams, welcome back to Cartier," she said with genuine warmth, extending her hand for a handshake. "I'm Patricia Morrison, the store manager, and it's such a pleasure to have you with us today. We have your favorites ready in the private viewing room." I stared at her in complete confusion, my mind racing to understand what was happening. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake," I replied carefully. "My name is Marlene Patterson, not Williams, and this is actually my first time visiting Cartier. I received an invitation for a VIP event, but I don't have any favorites or previous purchase history." Patricia's smile flickered for just a moment, and I caught a flash of surprise in her eyes before her professional training kicked in. "Of course, my apologies for the confusion," she recovered smoothly. "Let me show you to our private consultation area where you'll be more comfortable and we can discuss what brings you in today." Before I could explain that I was just browsing and couldn't afford to buy anything, Patricia was gently guiding me toward the back of the store past regular customers who were examining pieces with sales associates. The private viewing room was unlike anything I had ever experienced, with plush velvet chairs, a polished marble table, and original artwork on the walls that probably cost more than my annual rent. "Please make yourself comfortable. while I bring out some pieces I think you'll find interesting, Patricia said, gesturing toward a chair that was more luxurious than any furniture in my apartment. Can I offer you some champagne? We have an excellent vintage that pairs beautifully with our new collection. The entire situation felt surreal, like I had accidentally walked into someone else's life or been mistaken for a wealthy customer who was expected that day. Patricia's confidence about my preferences and her casual attitude toward what were obviously extremely expensive pieces made me increasingly uncomfortable, but I didn't want to create an awkward scene by leaving immediately. When Patricia returned with a velvet-lined tray containing jewelry that made my breath catch in my throat, I realized I was completely out of my depth. Diamond necklaces, emerald bracelets, and sapphire rings sparkled under the specialized lighting, each piece more stunning and obviously expensive than anything I had ever seen in person. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, but the price tags visible on some pieces showed numbers that represented more money than I could earn in several years. The peaceful atmosphere of my private viewing was shattered when I caught sight of a familiar figure through the boutique's front windows. Teresa's distinctive red hair was unmistakable, and even from a distance I could see the determined set of her shoulders that always indicated she was spoiling for a fight. She stood outside for a moment, clearly processing the sight of me sitting in the VIP room, surrounded by luxury, before pushing through the front entrance with obvious anger. "What the hell are you doing here?" Teresa demanded loudly as she stormed into the private viewing room, completely ignoring Patricia's attempts to intercept her professionally. "Of course you found a way to get special treatment you don't deserve. This is exactly the kind of manipulation I've been talking about." Patricia stepped forward diplomatically, trying to maintain the boutique's refined atmosphere despite the obvious family drama unfolding. "Miss, I'm sorry, but this is a private consultation. If you're interested in viewing our collections, I'd be happy to arrange for another associate to assist you in our main showroom." Teresa whirled around to face Patricia with unconcealed hostility. "Private consultation for her," she gestured dismissively in my direction. "Let me tell you something about my sister. She's a freelance graphic designer who lives in a one-bedroom apartment and drives a car that's older than some high school students. This whole VIP treatment is just another example of her somehow manipulating situations to make herself look more important than she actually is." The humiliation was overwhelming as I felt the stares of other customers beginning to focus on our glass-walled room. Several people had their phones out, either texting about the drama they were witnessing or actually recording the confrontation. I could feel my face burning with embarrassment as Teresa continued her public character assassination. "My sister has been doing this our entire lives." Teresa continued, her voice growing louder and more venomous with each word. "She acts innocent and humble, while somehow everything good just falls into her lap. She gets scholarships while I struggle with student loans. She gets art recognition while I can barely keep a job. She gets invited to exclusive events while I'm getting evicted from my apartment." Teresa, please stop," I pleaded, standing up from my chair in an attempt to physically position myself between her rage and the increasingly uncomfortable Patricia. "You're making a scene, and I honestly don't understand why I'm getting this special treatment either. I came here because of an invitation, but I'm just as confused about all this as you are." "Confused?" Teresa's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You're not confused, Marlene. You're just putting on your usual innocent act while you soak up all this luxury attention. It's the same performance you've been giving our entire lives, pretending to be surprised when good things happen to you while the rest of us struggle." Security personnel had begun moving discreetly closer to our location, and I could see Patricia reaching for the phone on the consultation table, probably preparing to call for additional assistance. The elegant atmosphere of the Cartier boutique had been completely destroyed by our family drama, transforming the sophisticated environment into something resembling a reality television show. "You know what your real problem is, Marlene." Teresa's voice had taken on the dangerous edge that I recognized from our worst childhood fights. "You walk around acting like you deserve all these privileges, but deep down you know you're just ordinary. You know you don't actually belong in places like this, being treated like you're somebody special, when you're really just a shadow pretending to be substantial." Her words cut deep because they touched on my own insecurities about the situation. Part of me had been wondering if I had somehow unconsciously manipulated this VIP treatment, if there was something about my behavior or presentation that had led Patricia to treat me like a valued customer. The doubt crept in despite my rational knowledge that I had done nothing but respond to an invitation. Other customers were now openly staring through the glass walls, some whispering among themselves about the family confrontation they were witnessing. Children pressed against the glass, while their parents pulled them back, and several people were clearly recording our argument with their phones, probably planning to share videos on social media within hours. "I've tried so many times to help you," I said desperately, my voice shaking with emotion and embarrassment. "I've offered to connect you with potential employers, invited you to stay with Kevin and me when you needed a place to crash, tried to be supportive during your job searches, but you reject every gesture and find reasons to be angry with me instead." "Help me," Teresa's voice cracked with years of accumulated resentment. "You mean help me be your audience while you live out your perfect life? Help me watch you succeed while I fail at everything I touch? That's not help, Marlene. That's just another way for you to feel superior while pretending to be generous." The situation had reached a breaking point where rational conversation was no longer possible. Teresa's face was flushed with anger and pain, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and her entire body language suggested someone who had moved beyond reason into pure emotional reaction. Patricia had finished her phone call and was watching us with obvious concern while security guards positioned themselves strategically around the viewing room. I could see that Teresa's desperation had reached a level where she was no longer thinking clearly about consequences. Her financial situation, combined with years of resentment and the public nature of this confrontation, had created a perfect storm that was about to explode in ways none of us were prepared to handle. The moment that changed everything happened when Patricia, perhaps trying to diffuse the escalating tension, lifted an absolutely stunning emerald necklace from its velvet display case. The piece was clearly one of Cartier's most expensive offerings, with a center emerald the size of a quarter surrounded by diamonds that threw rainbows across the walls of our viewing room when they caught the light. "This is exactly what I mean about your fake humility," Teresa exploded, pointing at the necklace with a trembling finger. "Even when you claim you're just browsing somehow, you end up being shown pieces that cost more than most people's houses. It's like you have some kind of magnetic field that attracts special treatment wherever you go." Something inside me finally snapped after enduring Teresa's relentless public humiliation and accusations. The combination of my genuine confusion about the VIP treatment, the embarrassment of having this family confrontation witnessed by dozens of strangers, and Teresa's refusal to consider that there might be an explanation we didn't understand yet, pushed me past my breaking point. "I don't understand this treatment any more than you do," I said, my voice rising to match Teresa's volume for the first time in our adult relationship. "I came here with the same confusion you're expressing, but instead of supporting me or trying to figure out what's happening together, you immediately assume the worst about my motives and attack me in front of all these people." The crowd outside our glass-walled room had grown substantially, with customers abandoning their own shopping to watch our family drama unfold. Some were holding up phones to record the confrontation, others were whispering commentary to their companions, and a few children were pressed against the glass with wide eyes, fascinated by the adult conflict they were witnessing. Teresa's response to my pushback was swift and vicious, her face contorting with years of accumulated rage and resentment. "You're nothing but a shadow pretending to be someone important," she screamed, her voice echoing through the boutique and causing everyone in the main showroom to stop their conversations and stare directly at us. "You're not special, Marlene. You're not better than me. You're just ordinary, and it's time someone told you the truth about who you really are." The word shadow hit me like a physical blow, carrying with it all of Teresa's bitterness about feeling invisible and unsuccessful compared to my achievements. The crowd outside had grown even larger, with people recording our confrontation on their phones and already beginning to upload videos to social media platforms in real time. Staff members throughout the store had frozen in place, unsure how to intervene in what had clearly become a family crisis, playing out in their luxury establishment. Patricia was speaking urgently into her phone, probably calling both security and police, while other associates tried to maintain some semblance of normal business despite the spectacle we had created. Then it happened. The sound of Teresa's palm connecting with my cheek echoed through the viewing room like a gunshot, sharp and unmistakable. The force of the slap snapped my head to the side and sent a burning sensation across my skin that brought immediate tears to my eyes. For a moment, the entire Cartier boutique fell into complete silence, as if everyone present needed time to process what they had just witnessed. I stood frozen, my hand slowly rising to touch my stinging cheek, feeling the heat radiating from where Teresa's hand had struck me. The tears weren't just from the physical pain, but from the overwhelming betrayal of being attacked by my own sister in front of dozens of strangers who were recording every moment of my humiliation. "That's what you get for always acting like you're above everyone else," Teresa declared, though I could hear a note of immediate regret creeping into her voice as the reality of what she had done began to sink in. "Maybe now you'll understand how it feels to be knocked down from your pedestal." The aftermath was surreal and horrifying. Every person in the store was staring at us through the glass walls, some with their mouths hanging open in shock, others still recording with their phones held high. Whispered conversations were starting up throughout the showroom as people began processing and commenting on the assault they had just witnessed. Children who had been watching were now crying or asking their parents loud questions about why the lady had hit her sister. Security guards were moving decisively toward our location, speaking into their radios and preparing to physically intervene. Patricia had gone pale and was frantically making multiple phone calls, probably to both law enforcement and Cartier's corporate management. I felt completely exposed and vulnerable, standing there with tears streaming down my face and a red handprint visible on my cheek for everyone to see. My carefully planned boutique visit had become a public nightmare that would probably be shared across social media within hours, forever documenting this moment of family betrayal and personal humiliation. The elegant atmosphere of the luxury jewelry store had been completely shattered by our confrontation, transforming the sophisticated environment into something resembling a crime scene. Other customers were backing away from our viewing room while still trying to get good camera angles, and I could hear fragments of their commentary. "Did she just assault her own sister? This is insane. Someone should call the police. Are you getting this on video? I can't believe this is happening at Cartier." Teresa seemed to realize the magnitude of what she had done as she looked around at the crowd of witnesses and the approaching security personnel. Her anger was rapidly being replaced by something that might have been fear or regret, but she was too proud to apologize or try to undo what had already been recorded by multiple phones and would soon be evidence in a criminal case. As I stood there trying to process the chaos that my simple invitation to view jewelry had become, I had no idea that the most shocking revelation was still yet to come, and that a man I had never seen before was about to walk through those doors and completely rewrite my understanding of everything. The entire energy of the Cartier boutique shifted dramatically. When the front doors opened, and a distinguished man in an impeccably tailored navy suit entered with the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention from everyone in the building. Even through my tears and emotional turmoil, I could sense that his arrival represented something significant, something that would change the trajectory of this already surreal situation. The man appeared to be in his early 40s, with silver threading elegantly through his dark hair and piercing gray eyes that swept the store with practiced authority. His suit was clearly custom-made, fitting him perfectly, and everything about his appearance spoke of wealth and power, from his platinum Patek Philippe watch to his handcrafted Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Patricia rushed toward him, immediately abandoning our crisis situation with obvious relief at having someone of higher authority to defer to. "Mr. Williams," she said breathlessly, her professional composure cracking under the stress of the situation. "Thank goodness you're here. We have an emergency situation that requires your immediate attention and guidance." My confusion deepened significantly at hearing that surname again. First, Patricia had mistakenly called me Mrs. Williams when I arrived, and now this imposing stranger shared the same last name. The coincidence seemed too remarkable to be random, but I couldn't make sense of any possible connection between this wealthy businessman and my own circumstances. As Patricia quickly briefed him on what had transpired, pointing toward our glass-walled viewing room and the crowd of onlookers still recording with their phones, his expression grew progressively darker and more concerned. His eyes found me standing there with my tear-stained face and the red mark still visible on my cheek, and something flashed across his features that looked unmistakably like recognition, mixed with deep protective anger. The security guards had reached Teresa and were speaking to her in low, firm tones about the assault they had witnessed, while she alternated between defensive arguments and attempts to justify her actions. Her earlier bravado was beginning to crumble as the reality of potential criminal charges became apparent, and she kept glancing nervously at the crowd of witnesses who had recorded her attack. Mr. Williams approached our viewing room with determined strides, his presence causing the crowd of curious onlookers to step back respectfully. There was something about his bearing that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed without question, and the way Cartier staff members positioned themselves deferentially around him indicated that he wielded significant influence in this establishment. When he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone who was used to being taken seriously by everyone around him. "What exactly happened here?" he demanded, though his tone was controlled and professional rather than shouting. His eyes moved between Teresa, who had gone silent at his appearance, and me, where his gaze lingered with what seemed like deep concern and familiarity. Patricia began explaining the situation in detail, describing Teresa's aggressive behavior, the public confrontation that had disrupted the entire store, and culminating with the assault that everyone had witnessed and recorded. As she spoke, Mr. Williams's attention remained focused primarily on me, studying my face with an intensity that made me increasingly uncomfortable, but also strangely familiar. His entourage, which I now noticed included what appeared to be personal security personnel, and a distinguished-looking man who was probably his attorney, had positioned themselves strategically around the viewing room. The lawyer was already taking photographs of the scene and documenting Teresa's presence, suggesting that legal action was being considered immediately. When Patricia finished her account, Mr. Williams turned to face Teresa directly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. His voice when he spoke was quiet but carried an undertone of barely controlled fury that made everyone present take notice and step back slightly. "Touch my wife again and see what happens," he said, each word delivered with precision and unmistakable threat. The statement hit me like a physical blow, and I found myself staring at him in complete bewilderment. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's been a serious mistake," I said, my voice shaking with confusion and residual emotion from the confrontation. "I'm not married to you. I don't even know who you are. My boyfriend's name is Kevin, and we've been dating for 8 months. His expression softened considerably when he looked at me, and something that might have been pain flickered across his features. "Marlene," he said gently, using a tone of voice that seemed strangely intimate despite my certainty that we had never met. "Your real name is Sarah Williams, and you're my wife. You were in a serious car accident 18 months ago that resulted in traumatic brain injury and significant memory loss." The words seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet viewing room, and I felt the world tilting beneath my feet. Teresa's mouth had fallen open in shock, and even the security guards had paused their intervention to listen to this revelation that was rewriting everything everyone thought they understood about the situation. "The doctors warned us that you might experience periods of confusion and false memories during your recovery." He continued, his voice patient and full of compassion that felt somehow familiar despite my confusion. "Your mind created an alternative reality to fill in the gaps from your trauma. The life you remember with Kevin, your apartment, your freelance work, all of it was constructed by your brain during the healing process." Mr. Williams reached into his jacket and withdrew a leather portfolio, extracting what appeared to be official documents and photographs. "These are our marriage certificate from 3 years ago, photos from our wedding in Sedona, and medical records from your treatment at Mayo Clinic." He explained, his voice gentle but firm. "Your real name is Sarah Williams, and you're the co-founder of Williams Medical Technologies, one of the leading companies in brain injury research and treatment." As he showed me the documents, fragments of images began flashing through my mind, like scattered puzzle pieces trying to find their proper places. I remembered a grand wedding ceremony in a red rock canyon with hundreds of guests. I remembered living in a mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sonoran Desert. I remembered charity galas and board meetings, a life of luxury and philanthropy that seemed like someone else's dream, but felt increasingly familiar. The revelation was overwhelming, but pieces were beginning to fall into place with startling clarity. The VIP treatment at Cartier suddenly made perfect sense if I was actually the wife of someone wealthy enough to command that level of attention and service. Patricia's confusion when I claimed to have a modest budget now seemed completely understandable given my actual financial circumstances. Teresa stood frozen in complete shock as the magnitude of the situation became clear to everyone present. Not only had she publicly assaulted someone in a crowded jewelry store, but that someone was apparently the wife of a billionaire who clearly possessed the resources and influence to make her life extremely difficult through legal channels. Alexander Williams. As I was learning my husband's name anew, maintained his composure despite what must have been an emotionally overwhelming situation for him as well. He gently guided me to one of the plush chairs in the viewing room, while Patricia discreetly managed to clear the remaining onlookers from the main showroom, giving us some privacy for what was clearly a life-changing conversation that would determine my future and Teresa's fate. The medical team warned us about this possibility from the beginning. Alexander explained, his voice filled with patience and love that felt somehow familiar despite my confusion. Dr. Harrison at Mayo Clinic said that severe head trauma could create false memory constructs that would seem completely real to you during the recovery process. You've been living in a carefully constructed alternate reality for the past 18 months while your brain has been healing from the accident. As he spoke, more memories began flooding back with startling clarity and detail. I remembered our sprawling estate in Paradise Valley with its infinity pool overlooking the valley and art collection worth millions of dollars. I remembered organizing charity events for the Children's Hospital and serving on the board of the Phoenix Art Museum. I remembered Alexander proposing to me during a private dinner at the Grand Canyon, with the sunset painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson. Your real work involved developing revolutionary medical technology specifically designed to help brain injury patients. Alexander continued, pulling out his phone to show me photos of what appeared to be a state-of-the-art research facility. Williams Medical Technologies has been at the forefront of traumatic brain injury treatment, and you were personally passionate about the research because of your background in biomedical engineering. The most disturbing revelation came when Alexander's expression hardened as he looked directly at Teresa, who had been listening to this conversation with growing horror as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. "What makes this situation particularly devastating," he said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "is that your sister knew the truth about your condition and your real identity throughout your entire recovery period." The betrayal hit me like another slap, perhaps even more painful than the physical one Teresa had delivered earlier. "You knew," I asked, staring at my sister in disbelief. "You knew I was suffering from memory loss, and you let me believe I was someone else entirely. You watched me struggle with confusion and false memories, when you could have helped me recover the truth." Teresa's face had gone pale, and she was backing toward the entrance of the viewing room, as if preparing to flee from the consequences of her deception. "I can explain," she stammered, but her usual confidence had completely evaporated in the face of Alexander's presence and the revelation of her elaborate betrayal. "She attempted to have your appointment here canceled this morning," Patricia interjected, speaking up for the first time since Alexander's arrival. "Someone called claiming to be Mrs. Williams's assistant and said there had been a change in plans. Fortunately, I decided to verify with Mr. Williams's office before making any changes to the arrangements, which is why everything proceeded as scheduled." The scope of Teresa's betrayal was becoming clearer with each revelation. She hadn't just known about my true identity, she had actively tried to prevent me from recovering it. Her anger about my VIP treatment wasn't jealousy about undeserved special attention. It was fury that her deception was beginning to unravel, despite her attempts to maintain control over my false reality. Alexander's investigation team, which I was learning had been working behind the scenes for months, had discovered evidence of systematic financial exploitation during my recovery period. While you've been living with false memories, someone has been attempting to access your personal accounts and manipulate your business affairs. He explained, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had clearly investigated the situation thoroughly. We've had forensic accountants tracking unusual activity across multiple accounts, Alexander continued, and the trail leads directly to your sister. She's been using your medical condition to gain access to funds and make unauthorized transactions, all while convincing you that you were someone else entirely. Teresa's attempt to flee was blocked by security guards who had positioned themselves at the viewing room entrance. The distinguished-looking man, who appeared to be Alexander's personal attorney, had arrived with a briefcase full of legal documents and was already photographing the scene and documenting Teresa's presence for what would clearly be a comprehensive criminal case. The restraining order paperwork is ready for filing, the attorney informed Alexander. We have multiple witnesses to the assault video evidence from store security cameras and documentation of the financial crimes. Between the identity theft, financial exploitation of a disabled person, and assault charges, this is going to be a very straightforward prosecution. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold as the legal machinery began moving against my own sister. The woman who had raised such a scene about my supposed privilege was now facing the consequences of attacking someone who actually did possess significant wealth and influence, along with the resources to pursue justice through every available legal channel. The accounts she accessed contained funds designated for our Brain Injury Research Foundation. Alexander continued, his voice growing colder as he detailed the extent of Teresa's crimes. She wasn't just stealing from us personally. She was taking money meant to help other people recovering from trauma similar to yours, funding that could have saved lives and advanced medical research. That information crystallized my decision about how to proceed. While I might have been willing to show mercy for crimes against me personally, the fact that Teresa had stolen from vulnerable patients and medical research made her actions unforgivable. She had exploited not just my condition, but the suffering of countless other people who needed the treatments our foundation was developing. As security prepared to escort Teresa from the store, while paparazzi gathered outside to photograph the development of what was clearly becoming a major news story, I felt the last pieces of my true identity clicking back into place. The simple jewelry store visit I thought I was making had actually been a carefully planned therapeutic exercise designed by my medical team to help trigger memory recovery in a familiar luxury environment. The woman who had called me a shadow had been living in the shadow of my real life, exploiting my vulnerability while I struggled to recover from trauma. But now, surrounded by the authentic elements of my true existence, I was finally ready to step back into the light and reclaim everything that was rightfully mine. 6 months later, I stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Paradise Valley mansion, watching the sunrise paint the Sonoran Desert in brilliant shades of gold and coral. The view was exactly as I remembered it now, triggering no confusion or false memories, just the peaceful satisfaction of being truly home again after the longest and most difficult journey of my life. My recovery had been remarkable, according to Dr. Harrison, who attributed my rapid progress to the shock of discovering Teresa's betrayal and the intensive therapy sessions that followed. The legal proceedings had concluded with Teresa accepting a plea agreement that included 5 years in federal prison for financial fraud, identity theft, and exploitation of a disabled person. Alexander had initially wanted to pursue the maximum charges possible, but I convinced him to offer the plea deal on the condition that Teresa would also enter a comprehensive treatment program for her gambling addiction, which we had discovered was the driving force behind her desperate attempts to access my accounts. The investigation had revealed the full scope of Teresa's scheme, which was far more elaborate than anyone had initially realized. She had accumulated enormous debts to dangerous people through compulsive gambling on everything from sports to casino games, and stealing from me had seemed like her only option for survival when the threats against her life became serious. Her creation of my false identity as Marlene Patterson was a calculated attempt to keep me from recovering my real memories and discovering her financial crimes. During my therapy sessions with Dr. T. Rodriguez, I worked through the complex emotions surrounding the betrayal by someone I had trusted completely. The hardest part wasn't the financial crimes or even the public humiliation at Cartier. It was accepting that my own sister had been willing to exploit my medical vulnerability and prevent my recovery for her personal gain. She had watched me struggle with confusion and false memories, knowing she could have helped me heal, but chose instead to use my condition as an opportunity for theft. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior, Dr. Rodriguez had explained during one particularly difficult session. It means choosing not to let someone else's destructive actions continue to poison your own healing and growth. You can wish someone well while still protecting yourself from their ability to cause further harm. I had decided not to pursue additional charges against Kevin, who turned out to be part of Teresa's elaborate deception, but claimed he believed he was helping me cope with a nervous breakdown rather than recovering from brain injury. The investigation revealed that Teresa had paid him to play the role of my boyfriend and support the false identity she had created, but his cooperation with authorities and genuine remorse led us to accept his testimony rather than prosecute him as a co-conspirator. My work with Williams Medical Technologies had taken on profound new meaning after experiencing firsthand the vulnerability and confusion that brain injury patients face during recovery. We established new protocols specifically designed to protect patients from financial exploitation and created support programs to help families navigate the complex emotions that arise when a loved one suffers memory loss and personality changes. The victim advocacy work became a personal mission as I discovered how many people had experienced similar exploitation by family members during periods of medical vulnerability. Research showed that financial abuse of disabled or recovering individuals by their own relatives was far more common than most people realized, and victims often felt too ashamed or confused to seek help or report the crimes. Alexander had been incredibly patient throughout my entire recovery process, working with medical professionals to create environments that might trigger memory recovery without forcing the process or causing additional trauma. The Cartier visit had been carefully planned as a luxury experience that might remind my subconscious of our actual lifestyle, though nobody had anticipated Teresa's intervention, turning it into such a dramatic and public confrontation. The most remarkable thing, I told Dr. Rodriguez during one of our final sessions, is that living with those false memories gave me perspective on what really matters in life. When I thought I was a struggling graphic designer, worried about affording an anniversary gift, I was actually more content in some ways than I had been as a wealthy philanthropist with unlimited resources. The experience had taught me that happiness isn't necessarily connected to circumstances or material advantages, and that the relationships we build and the compassion we show to others matter more than the financial resources we might possess. Even with unlimited wealth, I couldn't buy back the sister relationship that Teresa's choices had permanently destroyed. But I had gained a deeper appreciation for authentic connections based on genuine care rather than exploitation. I established a comprehensive victim support fund specifically for people who had been financially exploited by family members during periods of medical vulnerability after learning that such abuse was tragically common but rarely reported or prosecuted. Many victims felt too ashamed or confused to seek help, especially when the perpetrators were close relatives who claimed to be acting out of love or concern. Alexander and I also worked with our attorneys to create additional safeguards in our estate planning, establishing independent oversight mechanisms that would prevent any single individual from gaining access to our assets during a health crisis. We appointed professional trustees and created multiple layers of verification that would protect against future exploitation should either of us ever face similar medical challenges. The most profound lesson from this entire ordeal was understanding how family relationships can become toxic when desperation and resentment override love and loyalty. Teresa's jealousy had been festering for decades, but her willingness to exploit my trauma and prevent my recovery represented a fundamental betrayal that transcended normal sibling rivalry and entered the realm of criminal exploitation. The restraining order would remain in place indefinitely, protecting both my continued recovery and our family's security from any future attempts at contact or manipulation. While part of me still hoped that Teresa would find genuine healing and peace during her incarceration and treatment, I had learned the importance of protecting my own well-being by maintaining firm boundaries with people who had proven themselves willing to cause serious harm. Sometimes the people closest to us can inflict the deepest wounds, but healing means choosing peace over revenge and growth over resentment. I still carry hope that Teresa will eventually find recovery from her addictions and make amends for the damage she caused. But I've learned to prioritize my own healing and the safety of people I love over maintaining relationships with those who have demonstrated their willingness to exploit vulnerability for personal gain. Real family supports you during your most vulnerable moments, rather than taking advantage of those vulnerabilities for personal benefit. The love Alexander showed by patiently supporting my recovery, even when I didn't remember our life together or recognize him as my husband, demonstrated what authentic commitment looks like compared to Teresa's self-serving manipulation and betrayal. As I continue moving forward with my recovered life and fully restored memories, I carry the wisdom that comes from having experienced both privilege and ordinary circumstances during my recovery period. Whether surrounded by luxury or living modestly, what matters most is treating others with genuine compassion and building relationships based on mutual respect and authentic care rather than exploitation or manipulation. Now I want to hear from your experiences. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, especially during a vulnerable time in your life? How did you find the strength to move forward while still protecting yourself from future harm? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar family betrayal. Don't forget to like this video if my journey resonated with you and helped you feel less alone in dealing with toxic family relationships. Please subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding healing after deep betrayal, and share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar conflicts, because sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference in the world. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting my healing journey, and remember that no matter how dark things might seem or how deeply people you trusted have hurt you, there's always hope for recovery and renewal. If you're willing to fight for your own well-being and surround yourself with people who genuinely care about your happiness.